This week we begin the third book of the Torah, Sefer Vayikra. Now, if this is the third of the 5 books of the Torah, then it comes out that Vayikra is actually the center of the entire Torah. You have the first 2 books, Bereshis and Shemos, which are the beginning, the intro into the Torah. You have the end, which are Bamidbar and Devarim, books number 4 and 5, which are the end and the conclusion of the Torah. And then in the middle, so to say, the climax, like when one writes a book, you have the beginning. The middle is where the climax of the story happens. And then at the end, how the story concludes and finishes off, and what happens to each members of the cast. Over here, the center of the story, what is the center of the Torah? What is the climax of the entire Torah? The book of Vayikra. So what exactly is it in this book? Vayikra, and God called. Why is that the center of the entire Torah? And the answer is very simple and profound, which is that word exactly is the message of the entire Torah. Vayikra el Moshe. God calls to Moshe. Hashem calls, the whole point of Torah, 613 mitzvahs, Hashem choosing the Jewish people, developing this relationship with us, is that when a Jew walks the face of this earth and his life takes him where it takes him, he should be able to notice God's calling to him. Vayikra, God is calling to him. We have a calling, and our job is to answer and humbly follow Hashem's calling. What does Hashem want from me in this moment? And the whole point of all 613 mitzvahs and the entire Torah is to be able to tune into that calling. Hashem, when you wake up in the morning, He wants you to put on tefillin and daven. Before Shabbos, He wants the someone in the home, primarily the woman, to light Shabbos candles once a week to keep Shabbos. And in general, to try to notice the hashgacha pratis, the divine providence in every moment in life. And the whole point of Torah is for us to notice Hashem in our lives, that He calls on us for a certain mission and a certain calling in each moment. And our job is to try to find what is the calling of the moment and to lean in accordingly. In fact, there's a famous spin on this, a famous thought on this from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom, where he says the difference of Vayikra has a small aleph at the end. The difference of the word Vayikra and Vayikra, without the aleph, Vayikra means and it happened, and something happened passively, as if random, as if a random occurrence happened, Vayikra, and it occurred. But we see Torah as a small aleph, and that turns the word into Vayikra, and Hashem called. In other words, the voice of God in many moments in life is often very subtle and hard to find, and it takes a lot of humility, like the smallness of the aleph, as we discussed last year. And the whole point of the entire Torah is for us to humble ourselves, ask not what you want from God, but ask what does God want from you, to try to tune myself into that my life is not random, my existence on this earth and what happens to me in life is not just by chance, Vayikra, but to try to notice that small aleph which turns the Vayikra into a Vayikra, which turns every moment in life from a random happening into a calling, and to meet that divine calling graciously to do what Hashem wants from me at that moment. This message is very central to Purim as well. The Rebbe in Fabring in Tafshin Mem Dalet asks, what's the point of the whole beginning of the Megillah? The first chapter of the Megillah talks about how Achashverosh, a party animal king in Persia, threw 2 parties, massive parties for all of his ministers and for all of his subjects. And when he was drunk, he tried calling his wife Vashti, and she didn't want to come, so he killed her. And then eventually he wanted a new queen, Esther, a few years later. What's the point of that first chapter? That there was a drunken Persian king named Achashverosh who made 2 parties and killed his wife. That has nothing to do with the story of Purim. The story of Purim really starts when Esther becomes the queen, and Haman makes his gzeira. Why do I need that first chapter? And the Rebbe says perhaps that first chapter is there to tell us precisely this lesson. The whole Purim story, from the chapter 1 through chapter 10 of the Megillah, happens throughout 10 years. Chapter 1, the Jews are living in Persia. They notice the drunken king just killed his wife. Wow. 4 years later, in the 7th year of Achashverosh's reign, Esther becomes the new queen. No one's attaching those 2 stories in the moment. Esther now, a fine Jewish girl, finds herself in the palace with Achashverosh, a crazy dictator, Persian party animal dictator. And she's there wondering, possibly, perhaps, how did I end up over here? 5 years later, there's a man named Haman who made a gzeira to kill out all the Jews. And then in discussion with Mordechai, she says, Mordechai tells her, Mi idea im le'es kazais higat lamalchus. Who knows if this is the reason why your life took this turn? Can you see God's calling and can you lean into it? And then we know the rest of the miracle happens. The Megillah is trying to teach us that what seemed like random incidents from 10 years ago from the beginning of Achashverosh's reign, from year 3 from the 2 parties, to killing his wife, to 4 years later finding a new wife, Esther. 5 years later something happens with Haman, and then Esther notices what is God's calling and how I need to show up to this moment and to do what Hashem expects from me now. This is the story of Vayikra, to notice the Hashgacha Pratis and the calling in each moment, and to lean into it. And this is the message of Purim as well. Things in our lives don't happen at random, and when we lean in to find Hashem's calling, and to do what He wants of us in that moment, even if we're not sure how it's going to play out, at some point, it ripples effects to miracles and salvation. I just heard a beautiful story, and I'll end with this. There was a woman named Claire who lived in New York. Claire was single, and at some point she realized she's probably not getting married, and she's not going to be having any children of her own. And she decides that she wants to adopt a baby. So she specifically she wants to adopt a baby who's special needs, so she could take extra special care of him. She adopts a boy named Raphael. Freund, I believe, is the last name, who was from a Chassidic family in New York also. I believe of Satmar or a connection to Satmar, who at that time there was many stigmas about having special needs children in the home, and they decided to put up this child for foster care. So this woman, Claire, who was also a frum lady, she adopts this boy, and she takes big pride and joy in him. She carries him up the stairs until he's able to walk. By his upsureness, she invites the parents that they should do the first snips. She kept in touch with the kid's biological parents and tried having him continue with them and hug him, of growing the payas and everything. And she loved this boy, and everyone in town knew that this was her son, that she adopted, and she took tremendous pride, even though at that time there's many stigmas attached to these special needs children. When the boy becomes 7 years old, she gets a call from the biological parents saying that they want him back in the home and they want to raise him again. And as pained as she was, she knew that this was the right thing, and she gave Raphael back to his parents. At the age of 16, this boy, from his illness, passes away. Several years later, this woman, Claire, passes away as well. And at the funeral, this Rabbi Aaron Freund, the father of the boy, says he wants to speak at her funeral. Everyone knew that she fostered his son for some time. And he got up to say, I want you guys to know, you may think that Claire had no children of her own. Not only did she have one child, she actually has hundreds of children. Let me share with you what happened. When we saw from Claire how much pride and joy she took in our child, and how much she noticed the specialty of his neshama, even with his handicaps, we decided we were inspired by that. We decided we want to take him back in, and we want to have him as our own child and do what's right for him. And that's why we asked her to bring him back home. I was going to go to Shul that Shabbos. Shul begins 9 o'clock. I usually come early. But I decided I'm going to wait to 45 minutes into when the Shul packs in, so I could bring Raphael in, hold him or hold his hand, so everyone will notice and see my son. And I'm not going to carry this with shame, and I'm going to carry this with dignity and pride. I walk in, and I look everyone in the eye with giving them a good Shabbos with my son. And eventually, the children in the Shul start playing with him, and everyone learns to love him. And at some point, we start seeing new children that haven't shown face. I haven't known of them, and the parents were hiding them or just leaving them at home, ashamed of embracing them as their children, at least publicly. And this ripple affected to the whole community. So much so that all these newly embraced children in the community didn't have a school of their own. He says he quit his own job to open up a school. The school is called Sharei Chemla. I looked it up, and it seems to exist. And I started a whole special needs school for all the special needs children of our community who became known because of my son. And this is all due to Claire and her pride in raising my boy. And over here I think we see this point of Vayikra becoming Vayikra. What seemed like a random sad occurrence in this woman Claire's life. How she owned up to her shlichus of fostering a child with such class and dignity, and how that ripple affected to the Freunds, to them embracing their child and to meeting the calling of why Hashem placed that child in their care and for them to raise their child, and how that ripple affected literally to change a community and to build a whole mosid to help out a whole school to help out special needs children. Have a great Shabbos and a Feilchen happy Purim.